Well, we continue our rolling coverage on the continued rescue operations at the George building collapse. And joining me is independent safety engineer Dr. Natalie Skeepers, who is here to help us understand the rescue operation and what could have possibly led to the collapse. Natalie, good evening to you, and thank you very much for making time for us. These are such grave circumstances under which to have this conversation. 7 deceased, and then we heard just a short time ago as that siren went off from the building collapse site, another body retrieved from the rubble, bringing the number of deceased now to 8. There are still hopes by family members that some people could be found alive. But as you look at the situation, I mean, you were also the chair of one of the construction industry development bodies in South Africa, so you understand this field really, really well. What are some of your initial thoughts?
Good evening, Iman, and good evening to your listeners. Can I start with saying, I just want to pass my condolences to the families of the deceased. This is really a very sad time for us in South Africa. And starting with the fact that we have regulation standards and an Occupational Health and Safety Act that govern the work of construction work in South Africa, and the construction regulations in particular. This regulation was passed in 2003, amended, and we also have incorporated standards from the South African Bureau of Standards. I think it's, I can't get to the code now, but we have various forms of checks and balances that should be or should have been in place. And I understand that this is a private sector development that would have been probably engaged through some means of getting work done in this space. But we have rules and we have regulations in terms of project management. Even the SAC, PCMP have accredited project managers that must ensure that safety takes place on sites. So it is really, it's not supposed to be an unprecedented, unheard of, that we should be still seeing buildings collapsing. It could have been a structural issue. It could have been anything from an engineering defect. It could have been even shortcuts. So it's very, very sad that we're still seeing this. And I'm even more concerned that we haven't found some of the people that are still trapped in the building, as we've listened to the gentleman with his dog saying that they're still searching for bodies. So it's really sad this day in South Africa, because if they're not found, it means that the fatality rate would go up to close to 45 people dead. And it's unheard of, a 5-story building. So it's very sad for us to see this happening. So I think what we should also look at is that there are systems that should be in place, like audits, checks, inspections, reporting on unsafe acts and conditions. And the young man of 18 years old would have probably come there to look for work, maybe as a cleaner or a hand to pass on bricks. I'm not sure of the circumstances because it's a very unskilled environment. Anybody that's get picked off from the street that looks for work would have probably been told, to come and work on the site. And there's supposed to be training, and, a lot of things happen. The plans, the engineering plans that should have been submitted. So I'm really confounded with what has happened,
Natalie, if I can, just peel apart some of the layers of which you're saying, which you're referring to. And the one is, as you look at that, it almost, and again, we don't know, we just have the visuals that we are seeing, so some assumptions we are making about the way that building collapsed, in the way that it pancaked. And you said that systems, audits, and checks and so on should have been in place. Just walk us through a project of this kind. Some of the things that would need to be planned for in order to avert an event like this. What are some of the things the structural and the civil engineers and others do to ensure that the building has integrity?
So I just want to confirm that I'm not a structural engineer or say a civil engineer, but you've referenced the CIDB earlier on in my resume, and what would have happened if the CIDB was involved, because this is a private sector position or job that I understand the development that has taken place. They would have ensured that the contractor has at least have a history And a building like that, anywhere from a grade 7, 8, 9, would have given the contractor a pass in terms of his history, in terms of the ability to complete projects safely, the ability to complete projects and hand them over with no glitches and no incidents, you know. So from an engineering perspective, obviously, these buildings, you need to appoint an engineer. The engineer will do the groundwork. They will ensure that even the geotech is in place, making sure that the building, if there were add-ons, that the building is structurally safe. The building, if it is an extension, would need to be passed in terms of other work that needs to be done. And then on top of that, there are layers of people appointed. You have a project manager, you probably have the civil engineering team, that's part of it, and also a plethora of safety professionals. And this is where it goes wrong. This is the profession that I practice in as an advisor, where a lot of shortcuts are made in terms of the project, where you don't even appoint safety practitioners or safety officers to ensure that when unsafe acts happen, it's, you know, there's a report on that so that you can fix it if a near miss happens, that there's no issues with that. So unfortunately, from health and safety atrocities, many things could have gone wrong. I've not seen any reports. I've not been part of any of the investigations. So it will really take a while for things to be unearthed so that one can understand who is responsible. But I heard the gentleman from COSATU saying that the developer, the contractor, which we would call either the principal contractor or the owner of the project, would really be should be held liable for what has happened. This is unacceptable. It is unacceptable in this day and age where we have so many issues with health and safety. Iman, can I throw a question to you? When last have you heard of a CEO going to jail for safety violations in this country?
I mean, I'm scratching my head, but immediately nothing springs to mind.
Thank you, because safety is not really taken serious. And, you know, seriously, because it's one of those tick box exercises. And there are many professionals in this country, many. You don't have to go and find them outside of this country. All right. That can actually contribute and help organizations and companies to have a safer workplace.
Natalie, I want to go back to the issue around the regulations on occupational health and safety, and you referenced the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and you also mentioned this 18-year-old whose, dad was talking to the station as well, just very upset about, the fate of his child, and I suppose a lot of eyebrows were raised about an 18-year-old on a building site like this. What training would everyone, whether it is somebody that's mixing the concrete to those who might be on some of the upper levels, what are some of the requirements in law for the skilling and the training they would need to have to even be present on a building site?
Right. So I once again want to say, my condolences. My heart goes out to, he was a child, basically, an 18-year-old looking for work possibly. So initially, any site that is startup would have had to have induction. That means induction orientation as to what are we building here? What are we planning to achieve? What is your role? What are you not supposed to do? What are the boundaries of where you're supposed to interact? So if he was mixing what we call daga, that would have been his job, and he would have had to do just that under supervision. And this is where a lot of things also go wrong, where a youngster may have been employed and the next thing is asked to go and fetch this, to go and do that outside of the scope of his job, and finding himself in a situation where he doesn't know what to do. It could have been something to do with scaffolding. Like I said, I'm not sure of the facts, but he would have certainly had to get some form of orientation, and most importantly, personal protective equipment. Now, a building like that collapsing means that there was a lot of structural issues, because the building almost collapsed like a dead collapse, crushing, people who would have been in the space. No way to evacuate. That would have been part of the training. In the event of an incident, this is where you evacuate. In the event of a near miss, this is where you report it. So basic training on health and safety, even where you're not supposed to go and unlawful work. So unlawful work would include you're not allowed to go on that scaffolding site because you're not trained, you're not skilled enough to be in that area. So, and this is where the safety fraternity comes in, because we are like a guide. We serve in the space where we having the knowledge and the skills, and we would then advise our management, this is not a way to go. And most importantly, on risk assessments to assess the risk before any job is executed. So that is the foundation, what we call safety management. In terms of having systems. It would be training, risk assessments, and making sure that incidents are investigated, reported, because things happen on construction sites. And if it's not reported, it means it's going to happen again, because people want to hide. They don't want to be fired because they did something wrong.
Right. So, Natalie, I want to just come in quickly, because I'm just mindful of the minutes seeping by. We've got about a minute or so left, and I want to put this in. First of all, to just say to our audience as well that some of the aspects around which we're talking, we are making some assumptions about what exactly happened. So Natalie is talking more broadly speaking about some of the provisions in the sector and what the law is requiring on building sites like this. But as a final one, and a quick one, Natalie, if we can, is this distance between the developers and the contractors. Our assumption as the public is that anyone who's building something would have to be somebody that has experience in building. How does it work in real life in terms of the developers and the contractors and everyone else that's outsourced to actually put up a structure?
Look, I want to bring it back to what we do in the public sector with the Construction Industry Development Board. I know I'm no longer a chairperson there, but we have a lot of prescripts, a lot of rules, a lot of regulations to bring in that knowledge and experience to ensure that the contractor actually follows due processes. In the private sector, I'm going to say it the way it is. It's free for all. You even lucky that you sometimes hear of incidents because it's all under the carpet, because there is a body that regulates them, but they're not accountable as much as public sector projects, because we watch them with an eye. They won't get any projects if they messed it up. Like in this case, it's a monumental failure, and they would not have been given another chance to go out and have another project. This one, if I'm correct, it's a private sector project, and they have the right. They can build whatever they want, wherever they want, and be accountable to the Department of Labor, because there's also an entity that would come and check what is happening on site with the limited resources, because they can't be everywhere, right? So there's a problem of self-regulation, and there's a problem of being transparent as well. But the owner, the developers are accountable, lock, stock, and barrel. In this country, the buck stops with them. So they need to be held accountable in any form or shape for what happened there. They mustn't say the earth moved or the act of God or whatever. They need to be accountable. And I hope the community will hold them accountable, because this is very sad, as a practitioner in this space. I can't even believe that we're talking, about such big numbers in today's society.
Independent safety engineer, Dr. Natalie Skeepers, thank you very much for talking to us tonight. We appreciate your analysis and your expertise. We certainly will go back to George with our colleagues later on in the programs.